Good afternoon. I will call to order the July 30th meeting of the Minneapolis City Planning Commission. My name is Matt Brown. I serve as president of the commission. I'm joined today by Commissioners Magrino, Lupke-Pier, Coleman, Cogill, and Rockwell. This time I'll ask that you silence any mobile devices and we can get started with our meeting. Our first item of business is to approve the actions from the July 16th meeting. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve those actions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. Next, we will organize the agenda. You can find hard copies of the agenda in the hallway. We'll determine which items will be considered on the consent agenda, which will be discussed, and which will be continued to another meeting. So starting at the top, item number 1 is the downtown Minneapolis Cambria Fairfield development at 41 North 10th Street, 1001 Curry Avenue North, and 1001 and a half Curry Avenue North. That is a final plat. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 1? Seeing no one, we'll put that on consent. Item 2 is the SP2 drainage and utility easement at 125th Street Northeast. That is a vacation of an easement. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 2? Seeing no one, we'll put item 2 on consent. Item 3 is Mosaic Phase 3 at 1320 Lagoon Avenue, 1350 Lagoon Avenue, and 2900 Fremont Avenue South. Conditional use permit related to signage. We will continue that item to the August 13th meeting at the request of the applicant. Item 4 is the Minneapolis Impound facility at 50 Dupont Avenue North and 100 Irving Avenue North. Several applications for an impound facility. That application will also be continued to the August 13th meeting. Item 5 is Carvana at 1300 New Brighton Boulevard. Several applications for an auto-related use there. I know Commissioner Rockwell had a question about that, so we'll discuss item 5. Item 6 is the Greenbelt Homes at 3020 through 3024 6th Street North and 409 through 429 31st Avenue North. Several applications for housing development at that location. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 6? Seeing no one, we'll put item 6 on consent. Moving along, item 7 is the apartments at Franklin and Park at 1925 through 1935 Park Avenue. Several applications for a multifamily residential building at that location. I know Commissioner Kronzer had a question about that one, so we'll plan to discuss item 7. Item 8 is at 2323 Jackson Street Northeast. Several applications for a new multifamily residential building at that location. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 8? Seeing no one, we'll put item 8. Oh, you were here? Yep, we can discuss item 8. And finally, we have an item that was added to the agenda more recently, item 9. That is a plat for Calhoun Towers at 3430 List Place. Is there anyone who would like to speak on that item? Otherwise, we will consider that on consent as well. Seeing no one, our agenda as amended is as follows. Items 1, 2, 6, 8, and 9 will be considered on consent. We'll discuss items 5, 7, and 8. And items 3 and 4 will be continued to the August 13th meeting. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our Committee of the Whole consent agenda. And Vice President Lupke-Pier, do you have an update from the July 19th meeting?
Yes, on the July 19th meeting, we approved a land sale at 2106 23rd Avenue North. Land sales of the Greenbelt Cluster Housing, and land sale at 2434 Irving Avenue North.
All right, and at that meeting we found that those items were consistent with the Minneapolis plan. We'll take that as a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, may I have a motion to continue items 3 and 4 to the August 13th meeting? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, may have, we'll move on to our public hearings. And At this time, I will open the public hearing for the items on the consent agenda. Again, that's items 1, 2, and 6. One last call. Is anyone here for any of those items? Yes. Item 9 of the plat is also on the consent agenda. So again, that's 1, 2, 6, and 9. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing, and commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? You have a motion. Is there a second? You have a motion and a second. All in favor? And that motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our items for discussion, starting with item 5, 1300 New Brighton Boulevard. Staff is Ms. Sether. And Commissioner Rockwell, I understand you had a question about landscaping. Is there anything you'd like staff to focus on in their presentation?
Sure. You know, my only concern here is on the landscaping, and in particular the canopy tree requirement. And you know, I just have concerns from a heat island and a climate change impact. And so I guess a question would be, as you look at the map, which I don't have, oh, you've got it right there. It's up on the screen. I see they're only using part of the site. And so, well, this is, I guess, a question, but if you could just kind of discuss the landscaping and the soil conditions and so forth, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you. So the site is located at 1300 New Brighton Boulevard. The site's presently zoned I-1. As one of the applications, they're rezoning to I-2 to utilize that portion of the site that you see as the leasehold for Carvana. So the use is a new use. Previously, it was mobile. It was truck sales for large semi trucks, and prior to that, they sold mobile homes. But prior to that, even the site was a former quarry that was landfilled with mixed waste. And the site extended all the way north to the quarry shopping center north of here. The quarry shopping center is part of its redevelopment, and then also with Interstate 35W, those sites were remediated. This site is in a voluntary program. We understand it's no longer referred to as the Voluntary Investigation and Cleanup Program, but the Petroleum Brownfield. And so in 2009, we received an application to vary the surfacing requirements. So presently, the majority of the site is Class 5. So I'll just kind of walk through the site as it currently exists. So nearly all of the site is Class 5. There is one small building here with an addition that was constructed in 2011. New Brighton Boulevard formerly went through the site to the north. This was acquired by the previous property owner and was not originally included in the quarry or the landfill site. So in 2009, this really became our opportunity area to allow for increased landscaping. I spoke with the zoning enforcement inspector this afternoon and pulled the file, and the site is in compliance with that previously approved plan. So as you've noted, the leasehold area is a portion of the site, approximately a third, but the site requirement and the requirements you see in site plan review are for the entire site. So the minimum canopy tree requirement for the site is 95 trees. How we get there is we take the total site area, we subtract out that small building footprint, and the remainder of the site, 20% of that, is required to be landscaped. And of that landscaped area, we require one tree for every 500 square feet. So that's how we get to 95. And the applicant is proposing a total of 13 trees, again, kind of primarily focused in those areas not previously identified as in conflict with the areas for which there is some known pollution on the site. The previous application in particular related to allowing the Class 5 versus any sort of permanent pavement, concrete, asphalt, et cetera, is because off-gassing of methane gas is needed to occur when the site is not frozen. And by covering the site, essentially you get bubbles underneath, and then it also transfers off in larger quantities, therefore increasing the potential impact, environmental impact for air quality. So staff was recommending granting of the alternative compliance from the 95 trees down to the 13, just again, because the site portion that we are aware that is eligible for landscaping is quite minimal compared to the site as a whole. And I'd be happy to take any additional questions.
And commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Coleman.
If I understood you correctly, the entirety of the area that is available for landscaping is along New Brighton Boulevard, or is there more of the site that is available?
The applicant in 2009 provided soil borings that were dated from 2001. And a copy of that is in the staff report today. These are the sites for which the soil borings had occurred, and they found the methane gas at certain depths, as you see noted on this plan. Just again, indicating methane gas was present at a certain depth, and that was evident as potential for environmental impacts for covering of the site. So where you're seeing the soil borings is is under where the class 5 is, and so as far as having more of the site surveyed, it was not, but this was what was provided as part of that application.
Right. And Commissioner Rockwell.
So, sorry, just to clarify a couple points. So the concern with the methane is having impervious surfaces over it, not having pervious surfaces over it, right? Because you don't want it to gather and bubble underneath.
It's about large disturbed areas, is my understanding, and large disturbed areas would be expected, in our opinion, staff's opinion, when you create enough site space that would require over 80 additional trees on the site.
And then next question is, yeah, I think you said this, but the 95 is for the entire site, right?
That's correct.
And the site that they're actually using is about a third of that.
More or less.
Right. Okay. And last, I mean, when I think about some of the places we plant trees in the city, like downtown, it's a pretty tough environment, but we're able to kind of raised beds is kind of like a home gardener term, but
Sure.
do raised things with soil in them. Is that possible here? I mean, is there a reason why that's not possible? Maybe I'll ask.
It was our understanding that providing even a bed is not unlike paving a surface. What you're doing is you're preventing the gassing from naturally coming up through the existing class 5 area.
But if you were putting that on paving or just carving out the paving, I guess, I mean, my concern here, we saw a little bit of this. I realize that the applicants are caught in this, but we saw a couple weeks ago, Doran came with a parking lot repaving, and there were environmental concerns there, and we asked them to take care of stormwater management on site. And this seems like a site that's worthy, these big surface parking lots are major heat islands areas, and I have to imagine there are ways of managing the methane off gassing, since we actually want some of it, right? It's just kind of a balancing act. You don't want too much to bubble up. You don't want too much to come out at one time, is my understanding. And so, I would be interested in considering a proportional amount of trees, not requiring 95 trees for a third of the site, but a proportional amount of trees that would mitigate some of the effects, in particular, because this is a site which we'll use for continued car storage, which is a greenhouse gas emitter, and heat islands help balance some of that out. So I'm not sure that there's a question in there other than, did staff determine it was absolutely impossible to have trees on site, or it just seemed like it was a difficult maneuver and we're not sure how that would happen?
Staff took into account the evidence previously provided and the previous application that was applied for and approved when considering that large disturbances would be unique to the site, and therefore alternative compliance shall be granted. As far as requiring additional trees above what the 13 were proposed, we did not consider that. Instead, we focused our recommendations, as you saw, in really kind of screening and greening along New Brighton Boulevard. But the applicant is available perhaps to ask what kind of additional measures may need to be taken, perhaps with the MPCA, if large areas are disturbed, and what the process would look like.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
And Commissioner Coleman.
I do appreciate the motivation with the moderating heat, providing greenery, but I would be concerned about mobilizing contaminants. And I would greatly appreciate the applicant, if the applicant is here, speaking to the remediation or voluntary cleanup conditions of that agreement.
All right. And yes, if we have no further questions of staff, I can open the public hearing on this item and ask the applicant to speak first. I think we have a few questions of you.
So I'm Ryan Phipps, civil engineer with Kimley Horn. Staff did a great job kind of touching on history, so I'm going to skip through all of that and just kind of go straight to the MPCA's requirements. So for petroleum brownfield sites, there's 4 major risk factors. And I can read them for you. Put them up there so you can see them. And that's groundwater impacts, petroleum vapors leaving the site, surface water quality, and contaminated surface runoff. So as Commissioner Coleman said, the vapors are certainly a large concern, but as is disturbing that amount of surface, mixing in contaminated soils with the top surface, and then having a surface that when it rains is going to have a much greater issue with runoff, basically. So that's how I guess we came to the conclusion of where we're at, is with the MPCA guidelines and the history of the site. With there's petroleum within 1 foot of the ground, petroleum odors based on the soil borings. So having that information with the MPCA guidelines is why we proposed all of our landscaping improvements within the old New Brighton Boulevard.
All right. And commissioners, are there any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Rockwell.
So are there, it looks to me as a layperson like there's potentially more room for more trees based on the spacing in that New Brighton Boulevard area. I'm going to push you to think about where you can put more trees right now so that we don't impose it on you.
Sure. And so if you do the calculation of available space,
yeah,
and if you take that New Brighton Boulevard, you're looking at somewhere around 10,000 square feet. There's an existing stormwater management practice within that green space that you don't want to be planting trees in, as it's going to have conditions of very saturated soil for a long time, very dry soil for a long time. And then there are also public utilities. There is a public water main and storm sewer that runs through that area that you don't want to be putting trees over the top of. So as you start to reduce those areas out of your available planting space and divide that by 500, you get to the 13 trees that are proposed.
Can you tell me about trees planted, for example, in downtown, in other spaces, as a non-expert? How that is managed, where like there are urban conditions and there's clearly soil contamination and there's a lot of concrete underneath, and there are raised areas where new structured soils are put in. And
you're talking physically raised?
I'm talking, when you see, a 3-foot wall in box with soil filling that and a tree growing out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're saying not have the 1 by 500 square foot as the constraint and putting more trees in that area?
I'm saying being able to create more areas. I'm asking about the potential for creating more areas by creating above grade soil containers for some size of tree. And I don't know if the Parks Commissioner or landscape architects or anybody on here knows more about this than me, because I sure don't know a lot about it. But, is there a reason that wouldn't be possible at this site? I think of those kind of raised containers, but particularly when I'm looking at the trees here, you've got a lot of crabapple trees, which I don't think have a huge root ball.
My name is Christian Orr. I'm a representative from Carvana. Previously, I have worked as a landscape designer. Notedly, I'm not licensed, but I have worked with several. The needs of any given canopy tree will have a spread equivalent to its tree spread, and then it also has to have a greater depth. And in the field, it's considered, in the urban setting, when you put it into a raised planter bed, it's commonly called a tree coffin. Because while it can survive, it's not ideal, and you're still going to have the depth of the roots going down much deeper than we're wanting within that petroleum basis. So my recommendation, just from past experience, would be that would not be ideal either for the tree or for the site in general.
And the roots going into the petroleum soil below would be a concern for releasing the vapors, for bringing stormwater up, or because it's just going to be a tree filled with oil?
I'm speaking to the disturbance in general, just that whether it's man-made or by the tree itself, in either case, it would be a disturbance.
And Commissioner Lupke here.
Yeah, I had kind of just a few kind of follow-up questions on that as well. So it seems to me as though some of the concerns about runoff and you want to release these gases in the air, it seems like those are all things that usually we point to in terms of trees mitigating. So I'm wondering, like, what I would feel bad for a tree planted in petroleum off-gassing areas, but at the same time, is there a benefit to having them there to help mitigate the off-gassing that, in theory, we want to have take place? I mean, I know you don't want to disturb the soil, but for example, if there were 10 trees planted, how much soil do you need to disturb for 10 small trees to start growing and doing something?
Based on city code, you need a 2.5-inch caliper tree, which is maybe going to be a 3-foot root ball.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to dig down 4 feet by 4 feet. So if you're doing 10 of those, you're going to get to be a significant disturbance. And
So for this, a site this size, I mean, say what quantifies as significant? Because to me, I go with the size of this site. I mean, that doesn't seem like an overly large disturbance, although I understand it's a unique situation being a brownfield. But I mean, it seems to me it's a unique situation being a brownfield, and we can either have it continue to off-gas but not be anything other than a heat island, or we can try to do something about it. So
yeah, and I can't speak to the benefits of what the trees would do to the brownfield site as far as relieving contamination.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's any studies that prove that it does or doesn't.
Thank you.
Right. Any further questions of the applicant? If there are none, we can see if there's anyone else who would like to speak on this item. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on item 5? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have 3 applications before us. Commissioner Rockwell.
I can open up with a motion. And I see here, Shannon, just to be clear, we have a suggested change in a memorandum. Is that right?
Thank you. I forgot to mention that. Yes. So I had a conversation with the applicant last week, and then they had a chance to think about it a little bit more over the weekend. So we spoke earlier today. The applicant would like the flexibility in complying with the enclosed building requirement that requires screening. A view of this particular use that was not required for the previous use, but is required for the proposed use. So what we're instead, I struck number 4 that you saw in your staff report in your agenda today, and then provided a new number 4, which essentially reiterates the provision. I think it's 55280 that talks about screening at least 6 feet in height, 95% opaque. They could do that if they wanted to do a new screen wall or a new screen fence in lieu of doing the arborvitae behind the existing chain link fence.
Great. All right. With that information, I will put forth a motion to approve item A, the rezoning, and item B, the conditional use permit for a planned unit development.
We have a motion and a second to approve items A and B, the zoning, rezoning, and conditional use permit. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Kronzer.
Aye.
Lipke-Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
That motion carries. Commissioner Rockwell.
I will move approval of item C, site plan review, as stated in the July 30th, 2018 memorandum, and add an 8th proposed condition, which is that applicant shall work with CPED staff and park board staff to maximize the number of trees on site up to the proportional amount required on the entire site for the use area, approximately 30 trees.
All right, and we have a motion and a second to approve item C, the site plan review, noting the changes to condition number 4, also adding an 8th condition that the applicant work with staff to maximize the number of trees on the site. We'll give the applicant an opportunity to respond to that.
I can explain, let me explain the
Oh, yeah, Commissioner
motion
Rockwell.
first, and then you can rebut if you want. So the intent there, which I hope is clear, is that I don't think this commission is going to be able to figure out how many trees are actually feasible on site. And I think with a deeper dive with CPED staff and with park board staff, we can figure out the maximum number that work with MPCA's regulations, that work with the sort of practicality of the site. And I just want to defer to staff expertise, but want to hope that staff will push to figure out what is actually feasible with the applicant.
Sure. Chair Brown, Commissioner Rockwell, I just want to confirm, when you say proportional area of the site, we're referring to the proportional landscaped area of the site, correct?
Correct. So the tree requirement for the entire site is 95. You can do the actual math on if it's a third, then it's 31 or something. If it's less than that, up to less than that. But you're using some percentage of the site, so that percentage of 95.
Okay, so it's of the site, and it's, I think our preference would be, given that we cannot landscape the other areas of the site, that we would use, that we would calculate the total area on site that is actually landscaped currently, that we don't have to further disturb. So whether that's 10,000 feet or 12,000 feet, and then we would calculate it based on the 1 per 500 using that landscaped area. If that's clear, that's the approach that we've been using.
No, the approach, the calculation would be the total area of the site, of the portion of the site that you're using, which is approximately 1/3 of the full. So there's the full site, and then there's the portion that you're using. And then you divide that by 500. And that's the number of trees. That is the maximum number we would require. And where those are placed, it doesn't matter as far as I know.
Okay, so if I hear you correctly, this is an aspirational. We are fully committed to working with staff, and we'll try to maximize what we can. But I want to be clear that we've exhausted our options. We are going to also be adding somewhere in the range of 50 to 60 additional arborvitae shrubs in this landscaped area. So that's as a result of, I think it's condition maybe number 8. So we are going to be adding additional landscaping, but I want to confirm that it's aspirational and we are committed to working with staff.
It is aspirational if CPED staff and park board staff tell you that you don't have to get there. Otherwise, it's a requirement.
All right. Thank you.
All right. And Commissioner Coleman.
I just may not be familiar with this, but what is the basis for us, our ability to bind park board staff to do anything?
I have no idea, but I did consult with our park board commissioner on whether they would be willing to do this.
They may be willing. I just would like to know our authority for doing that.
Commissioners, we do work cooperatively with park board staff on things like preliminary development review. So I'm confident that, we're not asking them to take a formal action of some sort or delegating our authority in any way to them. I think the spirit of the condition is to work cooperatively with them, which I'm sure we can do.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? If there is no further discussion, we have a motion and a second to approve item C, the site plan review, noting the changes to condition 4, adding an 8th condition related to maximizing the number of trees. And clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman,
Aye.
Cogill,
Aye.
Franzer,
Aye.
Lipke-Pier,
Aye.
Magrino,
Aye.
Rockwell,
Aye.
Sweezy,
Aye.
7-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 4. Next item for discussion is item 7, 1925 through 1935 Park Avenue. Staff is Ms. Smith. And Commissioner Kronzer, I know you had a question about Is there anything in particular you would like staff to focus on?
Yeah, the southwest corner of the building, including, I think there's a handicap ramp going up to the main entry, and kind of the staff's conditions regarding window addition at that, and then the canopy and what the intent of the conditions are.
Yes, thank you. So if we just want to talk about that particular condition, I can show a rendering. So the site is located at the northeast corner of Franklin and Park. So here's how the building is set on the site. And you can sort of see it in the top image. This is the view from, looking northeast at the center of the intersection. So as part of the reduced yards, the request to reduce the required yards along the west elevation and the south elevation, staff is recommending a mitigating condition of approval to open up the corner a little bit. Since the initial land use application submittal, the applicant has revised their floor plans, so that the ones that you see right now are the ones that they are submitting, but they're putting an exercise room at that corner. So staff is recommending a condition to just get some more windows and active functions. There's also a request to have alternative compliance for the minimum ground floor active functions requirement along Franklin, and so that's the south image. So more than, there's about 45% of it is active, whereas the requirement is 70%. So also as part of that request, staff is recommending additional window area on the south and west elevations, particularly at that corner. And as you mentioned, Commissioner Kronzer, that there is an accessible ramp in the required front yard, and if they are able to comply with the handrail height requirement, then it would be considered a permitted obstruction. You can see it a little bit more closely here. So, and then I think you also had a question or comment about the awning. Right now, they're proposing a wood composite material, which is also the Nichiha that's proposed on the elevations in the wood color.
And the staff recommendation or condition is to change that to an actual awning that shields from weather. Is that correct?
And it should be, and that it be metal.
And that it be metal.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you show us where the handicap ramp is? Does it lead right from the corner of the building?
Yeah, it's right here. So I'll show the site plan maybe.
Yeah.
So this is on Park. This is where the entrance to the building is. Oops. We'll go back to a floor plan. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Goodness. Yeah, so I guess in the rendering you can see it here a little bit too. I think the first slide had it the best though.
Well, I see a discrepancy between the architectural drawings and the civil drawings. Is it, see the southwest corner of the building on this plan? It appears that the wheelchair ramp is coming right off, very near the corner of the two streets. If you go back to the civil drawing.
Yeah.
My ultimate question is this canopy essentially over the handicap ramp that leads from the corner of the building to the main entrance north?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't believe so, but
certainly appears that way because there's stairs going up to those two doors along Park.
I don't believe so. I think their intent is that there's the entrance here, and then the awning canopy would be at the corner right after that. But we could certainly ask the applicant to clarify.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah,
ask,
because the drawings aren't consistent at all.
yeah, we can ask that of the applicant in a minute and just see if there are any other questions of staff before we open the public hearing. Commissioner Lupke here.
Yeah, I had a question too about the garage access, given the setback variance request along Park, whether or not there's room for automobiles to actually exit without seeing pedestrians before they hit them, really, because it seems awfully close to the sidewalk. It doesn't seem like there's enough room for stacking to occur. So it's hard to tell on the plan how much space they actually have before the sidewalk, given their request for the setback.
So it looks like
And the
they're
transformer, is that 4
10
foot?
feet,
Yeah.
10 feet from the curb plus a few feet here. So
Is that a planter, like a boulevard? Is the sidewalk in between a planting zone adjacent to the structure as well as to the street? So that's what it looks like. And then can you see past the transformer? For example, if you were heading westbound on Park before this, will a car be able to see a person, given the fact that it's right across from I forget the name of the facility, but it's a lot of people who have sight impairment. It seems like a little bit of a concern. How tall is the transformer? And it looks like maybe only 4 or 5 feet of pull out before you even see.
they have not specified the height of the transformer. And we are recommending a condition of approval that it be fully screened and also have plantings around there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how tall it would be.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, Franklin. My bad. Yeah. So, okay.
But yeah, it looks like they would have about 15 feet between the building edge and plus a few more feet and the curb line.
Mm-hmm. But not between that and the sidewalk line.
They'd have 4.5 feet.
Okay. Thanks, Maylene.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Any further questions of staff? Hearing none, I will open the public hearing on this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first, and please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Who would like to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Was name and address correct?
I'm sorry?
Name and address correct?
Yes, name and address,
Cool.
please.
So my name is Chan Sledaha. I live at 1829 Park Avenue. And so I wanted to speak specifically about kind of the retail space. Or what?
I do want to ask the applicant to speak first.
Oh, my apologies. I'm sorry.
If you don't mind, then we can get some of these questions answered and we can move on to other speakers in a minute. So yes, please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Damaris Hollingsworth, architect and the applicant for this project.
And is there anything you'd like to add to staff's presentation, or otherwise perhaps you could answer Commissioner Kronzer's question?
Sure. So is there a way I could show something?
Yeah. Feel free to just set that on there and.
Okay. It's not really easy to see though. So the idea. I'm gonna go back.
I think there's a button there that you can just zoom in or out. Otherwise.
Sorry.
Yeah, otherwise the operator can take care of it.
It's more
There we
light.
go.
And I don't know what the lighting, but I was just trying to show the idea of the corner. So the request from the staff came in, and we kind of rushed to address the creation of a fitness center in the corner. But yes, the whole process of re-rendering the whole building and creating all the exhibits did not happen because we had a quick turnaround. But the idea is to increase the size of the windows in that corner, and the awning, the metal awning, would be only emphasizing that corner. So answering your questions from earlier, Mr. Kronzer, we are not intending to cover the ramp. It's really to accent the corner and to bring more presence in that corner as requested.
So as a follow-up to that, where is the wheelchair ramp? Is it per the civil drawing?
Per the civil drawings, yes.
Okay.
Not per the renderings. So
I guess I'm struggling with why wouldn't you put a canopy covering the wheelchair ramp up to the main entrance? It's an architectural element, but there is actually a pretty good function for a canopy if it's over a wheelchair ramp. Mm-hmm. So have you thought about extending that to the door?
We have not, because the first request we received was more to create a stronger presence in the corner. So we thought of vertical element, and I believe the canopy and the pergola was actually the suggestion that we create some kind of pergola and bigger windows in the corner. So our original intent was never to create a path or a weather protected path to the door. It was always to create something bolder in the corner instead of what we had before, which was just a regular facade and regular windows that match the residential units.
Okay, just a different question. Are there operable windows in the units?
Yes. Mhm.
Thank you.
They are.
Are there any further questions of the applicant? If there are none, we can move on to some other speakers now. And if you'd like to come up to the microphone and state your name and address for the record, that would be great.
All right, I'll try again. All right, so my name is Chance Ledaha. I live at 1825 Park Avenue. It's a small condo association just about half a block north of the proposed development site. So first of all, I'm super excited. I think having a new development in the area is really exciting for me and for the area as well. But my concern primarily is, well, first with that garage space, if you stand out by Park and Franklin, there's really not much leeway to get out into the street, especially during a rush hour time period. That's a pretty rough area just in terms of traffic. And I know right now, considering the Franklin Bridge is closed is one of the things that I'm thinking of, but adding 20 cars coming in and out is going to create a lot of difficulty. But to speak on kind of the retail spaces, what my big passion is down the street, there are some commercial facilities or retail facilities, and it's really important to me that we have more retail space in that area. I think it's this is one of the first newer builds that's going into the area in quite a while. And to have a retail presence is something that's super important to me. And kind of as the area continues to grow and develop, without that retail space, I think it allows the area to be more usable for people without cars. And that's something that I'm passionate about, is making sure that that space is usable for people who don't have vehicles, and retail space in that area makes it more walkable. And walkability is something that's super important to me. In terms of the setback that was brought up, I have no issue with the building that's right against the sidewalk. Just retail space, and then more parking would be great, but I guess I can't have everything on my wish list. Just keeping in mind that Park and Franklin, that intersection gets super duper busy, and having a garage right there is going to create a lot of extra conflict. I think that's all I really got for you.
All right. Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Please come to the microphone, state your name and address. You can decide who would like to go first, and state your name and address for the record. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Pleasant Radford Jr. I also live in the same housing association, 1829 Park Avenue, and I think this is a great project as well. Similar concerns with the parking. I park on the street, and so just making sure that there's ample parking for the people who are in the units, but also for people who visit as well, so that is not impacted. And then just residential or some mixed use component to it as well, as the city continues to grow, just being thoughtful about the retail space and other areas as well, and making sure that we maximize the space that we have. And then also just the affordable housing. I'm unsure what that means, if it's if it's below market rate, what that price is, or is there going to be a mixed income group that lives in this particular facility? That's it.
All right. Thank you. And next speaker, please state your name and address.
My name is Cecil Smith. I live at 1331 Washington Street Northeast. I serve on the board of Ventura Village, where this project is located. I'm the Crime and Safety Chair. I also participate in the Housing and Land Use Committee for the neighborhood. I want to speak in support of the project. The developers came to us at the end of last year, before they had any real renderings or drawings, to ask for neighborhood input on what we wanted to see in the space. And I applaud them, because they've come back with a project that is what we asked for. We asked, in fact, it's further back from the street than we desired. And part of the reason for that is we really need safety through environmental design in our community. This project is right across the street from our brand new basketball courts in PV Park. PV Park, if you look at any crime heat map in the city of Minneapolis, especially the 3rd precinct, it has one of the highest levels of police responses. We've had drive-by shootings at the basketball courts, And we need this space activated, and we need eyes on this street corner and on our park to keep it safe. And this project provides for that. Furthermore, we have sought housing in our community that is market rate but affordable. We have lots of subsidized housing in our community, and we have a pattern of subsidized housing. But this is a housing project that has, as the developers call it, attainable housing. And there are no subsidies. And part of the reason why this project works is because of the building technology that's being utilized in this project. And so I would urge support of this project because we need this kind of housing. In fact, we need this kind of housing at scale in our state. I just recently concluded service on the Governor's Housing Task Force, and this project was profiled because this is the kind of building innovation and development cycle that makes for attainable housing in our community that we really need on scale, which it goes beyond what the public purse can provide, but what we can do with private investment dollars. And that's what's coming into our neighborhood, and we're excited to see that. So I would caution about retail. We've had unoccupied retail space that has sat for years empty at 2400 Park Avenue, Chicago Avenue, and at Franklin and Portland Avenue, because we are not yet at a point where we can attract retail, but this kind of density will yield that in the future. We hope as other projects come before you, and we know that the city has an RFP project for Chicago and Franklin. We hope to see something there that would add to the retail landscape of our community. So I urge your support.
Right, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, and please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Bill English. I represent the North Job Creation Team. The owner of this project, which unfortunately could not be here today, is a significant individual, and there are some parallel stories that this commission needs to hear as you consider this project. The owner is a man named Tashida Tufa, who came here, who is a naturalized citizen, Christian citizen from Ethiopia. In a year and a half ago at 4640 Lindale North, he took an old dilapidated facility and created it, invested over $1 million to create asphalt the land and to create a beautiful building where it was a dump before. But more important than that, he created 70 living wage jobs with benefits, mostly for single female heads of household, many of whom are women of color. The goal of the North Job Creation Team is to bring 1,000 living wage jobs with benefits to North Minneapolis. This gentleman has created 70 and is in the process of trying to bring 200 more, and was recently being recommended by Hennepin County staff to purchase a site at 37th and University, where he will build a state-of-the-art facility garage and add over 250 living wage jobs and benefits. He currently employs over 80 people from the 5 North Minneapolis zip codes, where the highest level of unemployment in the country. Let me be specifically more where these stories parallel. He chose as a developer, as a member of the North Job Creation Team. The Thor Companies has been there since our beginning 4 years ago. During that period of time, we brought over 700 living wage jobs and benefits to Minneapolis. We didn't create them all, but we stimulated many of those, including the location of Minneapolis Public Schools headquarters, of which I personally led that battle to get those jobs. They now have over 300 people from North Minneapolis zip codes. So we're talking about a significant impact, and 2 people of color. One, the developer who just invested over $37 million at the corner of Plymouth and Penn. Mr. Tufa wants to create housing for his employees. I brought the term attainable housing here from San Diego in a visit there. So this shows of the term attainable housing is one that means workers who make the kind of income, living wages he now is almost being priced out of the Minneapolis market. This and the salaries he paid will allow him to house many of his employees and employ other people in the city. So I urge you to consider the uniqueness of this project in the context that you have two minority-owned companies coming together as partners on two major projects that not only will provide attainable housing, but will also provide housing for people that need jobs in or near their living community. And that includes the area south of downtown Minneapolis. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have several applications before us, total of 6. Are there any further questions, or would someone like to start things off with a motion? I might just ask the applicant, since we did get a question about the affordability or price point of these units, would you be able to kind of speak to that? What demographic or income level are these units geared toward?
Our goal on the project Crookshank with forward living development, but our goal has always been to be at about 60 to 80% AMI, which we are achieving now with the current building that we have sitting in front of us. So that's, in a nutshell, that's where we're at.
Thank you. Commissioner Rockwell.
Well, we have the applicant up there. Question, just because we got a question on the entrances and exits to the parking. It seems like there might be a discrepancy again between the engineering drawings and the elevations. Is there one entrance into the parking garage off of Franklin, or is there also an entrance off the north elevation?
It's the only entrance is off of Franklin, correct?
Okay, so the garage door looking thing on the north elevation is not a door?
No.
Great, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lupke-Peer.
Yeah, I have a question for the architect. So, and mainly, can you put a site plan up so we can see that turn around? So my question is still about, and I apologize if it park earlier, I meant Franklin, the drive aisle, the exiting from the parking along Franklin Avenue, given the fact that it's 4.5 feet from the sidewalk, and that's the front of a car, like you won't even exit the garage as a person until your car's already in the sidewalk, and the addition of the transformer in that location. Can you explain a little bit about if you guys looked at any of those sort of studies to see whether pedestrian environment and realm is going to be impacted? Because I can't help but think that a car trying to get out onto Franklin during rush hour is going to be sitting blocking the entire sidewalk, and also going out and not even seeing a person or a child before they can even get out of the garage.
So for the transformer, the last iteration since last week for the civil drawings, we did remove the transformer from that location. So there'll be a clearer view on that way. And we are creating, of course, there is the mirrors that we can put in there so people know when you're coming in and leaving, some kind of alarm, or when you're coming in, we had that thought through. If you're driving and trying to turn left, we could not potentially have a podium with the car reader, because then you'd not have enough time to open the door. So that's why we are creating, so the entrance would be only with a remote control, so you can from far away open the door, and the door won't close until you pass through. Okay. So then you have enough time to wait for pedestrian, wait for the cars, make your turn without having to rush, and then the door would come down.
And in exiting it, can you talk a little bit about a vehicle exiting the garage, and whether or not they have to occupy the sidewalk, or whether they can even see people coming before they have to get into the sidewalk with their vehicle?
So we would be counting on the mirrors and also some kind of siren or some signs. So then a combination of both, we would have, it could even be voice activated if it needed to be. So pedestrians know their car coming, and then drivers can see the pedestrian from both sides.
Thank you.
Right. Any further questions, or would someone like to start things off with a motion? Commissioner Kronzer.
I propose to make a motion to return the variance to increase the maximum allowable impervious surface.
We have a motion and a second on item A to return the variance for impervious surface. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Colgill.
Aye.
Kronzer.
Aye.
Lipke Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
Motion carries. Commissioner Kranzer.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve staff recommendation for item B, the variance to reduce the minimum front yard requirement along Park Avenue with the 3 stated conditions, although I have some modifications to those conditions.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Kranzer, maybe you'd like to just add those modifications to that
Sure.
motion.
Condition 2 get modified to state the west elevation shall be revised to accommodate an additional 40 square feet of window focused at the southwest corner with lower windowsills. And the third condition to be modified to state the awning shall be metal to create full weather protection and be extended to the north side of the main entry. I can speak to that.
All right. So we have a motion and a second to approve item B, the variance for the front yard requirement along Park Avenue with the 3 stated conditions, couple of modifications. 1 to condition 2 that the west elevation is revised to accommodate an additional 40 square feet of window area at the southwest corner. Condition number 3 that the awning shall be metal to create full weather protection and be extended to the north. Commissioner Kranzer.
I really like the way this project's evolved. We saw it at Committee of the Whole quite a while ago, and I think we all expressed a little concern about the design of the building. I think it really evolved. My additions to these conditions are really about the safety aspect of making that corner more open, creating some weather protection along the wheelchair accessible route is, I think, pretty reasonable. I think I look forward to having this project built on this corner.
All right. Any further discussion? And I might just ask the applicant if that seems reasonable or something you can work with staff on if you had any other reaction. In the meantime, we can see if anyone else has comments. And yes.
Yeah. We believe that those are fair things to do, so should be okay with that.
Sounds good. And if there is no further discussion, we have a motion and a second to approve item B. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Vogel.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Lipke Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
And that motion carries. Commissioner Kranzer. Continue.
Item C, the variance to reduce the minimum corner side yard requirement along Franklin Avenue with the 2 stated conditions, and with those 2 conditions modified to match the previous item.
All right. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second to approve variance C with the 2 stated conditions and also modifications to match the conditions as they were modified in item B. Commissioner Lupke Pier.
I'm wondering if Commissioner Kranzer would consider entertaining condition 3, the requirement of an audible exiting signal. That way it alerts pedestrians as to vehicles exiting and entering the garage, since it is so close to the pedestrian realm. Thank you.
Okay, so we're adding a 3rd condition that there is an audible exit signal at the parking garage exit to alert pedestrians. We have a motion and a second to add that condition. Is there any further discussion on adding the condition? Hearing none, we can just do a voice vote. All in favor? Any opposed? And that motion carries. Going back to the original motion to approve variance C, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Vogel.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Lipke Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
And that motion carries. Commissioner Kranzer.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve items D and E. D being the variance to reduce the minimum interior side yard requirement along the north property line, and E being the variance to reduce the minimum rear yard requirement along the east property line.
Second.
right, we have a motion and a second to approve items D and E. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Colgill.
Aye.
Cronzer.
Aye.
Lipke Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
That motion carries. And Commissioner Kranz.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the site plan review with the 9 stated conditions.
We have a motion to approve item F, the site plan review with the 9 stated conditions. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Colgill.
Aye.
Cronzer.
Aye.
Lipke Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 7. Our next and final item for discussion tonight is item 8, 2323 Jackson Street Northeast. Staff is Mr. Crandall.
Good evening, Commissioners. The project before you is a proposal at 2323 Jackson Street Northeast. You'll see on the current zoning map that the property is currently zoned for the R4 district. The site is currently a vacant lot. The applicant is applying to rezone the lot from R4 to R5. They are seeking several yard variances and a variance to the maximum lot coverage to construct a new 4-story, 65-unit residential building on the property. The proposal includes one level of enclosed parking that is accessed off of a public alley on the south end of the site. And the remainder of the ground floor level facing both Jackson Street and 24th Avenue are lined with active residential units, including walk-up residential units and residential amenity space. The applicant's proposing to include some new landscaping both along Jackson and 24th. You'll notice that the property line for the project is actually set back about 8 feet from the public right-of-way in or along Jackson Street, which is part of the reasoning for the variance in that the project itself is located immediately adjacent to the Central and Lowry Activity Center, and also within the Central Avenue pedestrian-oriented overlay district. And as you are familiar, the PO generally calls for a more urban condition in terms of the building wall not being located more than 8 feet from the property line. So staff felt that those variances were supportable based on those two conditions. And then I think that pretty much sums up my summary of the applications, and I can take any questions if there are any specific ones.
Commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Hearing none, I will open the public hearing on this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first and see if there's anything you'd like to add to staff's presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the Commission. Thank you for your time this afternoon. I guess a few things that I'd like to point out as sort of a preamble to your own review of the project. A couple of those would be that we have had the opportunity to meet once with the neighborhood at this point, and we think that discussion will continue. I think the other items that we might want to bring up there were some concerns from the neighborhood about stormwater. The project does use a good portion of the site, and it's currently a green space, so understandably so. In that area of concern, we're looking to include green roof on that lower roof above the area to the just to the east of the 4-story portion, which you can see, which is about, I don't know, plus or minus quarter of the building, I guess. And the idea there being, obviously, we get some visual benefits for both neighboring buildings as well as our own residents, as well as some stormwater capability of some storage, as well as sort of delayed release from the building itself. Let's see. Just a brief overview of the elevations. You've probably reviewed them already. Fiber cement, brick, obviously glass windows and some metal panel are being used with the 2 street sides having walk-up units and covered areas, as well as planters out in front to create to give a rhythm to that street scape, as well as to provide obviously a flexibility for those people using those homes for getting out and in easier, as well as better view of the street. I think that's sort of the highlights of just a few things that may or may not have been evident in the staff report or in the presentation before. Anything else? So I was Sheldon Bird with EGR Architecture, and this is Rob. Do you have anything? Okay.
Yeah, please state your name and address if you
Sure.
don't mind.
Good evening, Rob Lubinow with Yellow Tree. Our office is at the corner of 38th and Cedar in South Minneapolis. We are both the developer, builder, manager, and also the property owner for this building. Just want to elaborate on what Sheldon had to say on a few items. One, we did have the opportunity to be with the neighborhood group multiple times in the community. And there was a few things that was very apparent from the outset, and that was their core values of innovation, art, and energy efficiency. After our last meeting, I would say we made some substantial changes that's now incorporated in the packet that you have before you, and that kind of stemmed from 3 major points: 1, stormwater, 2, parking, and 3, art. So what we did since that last meeting is we incorporated a makerspace. So from what I can find, we are the first market rate apartment that will have or has chosen to provide a maker space or art space and a gallery within the building. So this does a few things in a market rate apartment. One, it does allow for affordability and provide or add to the fabric of Northeast, being that arts district. So for those that can't afford to have their own space to make art or to keep their supplies, that do work full-time jobs, we have something on site that allows them to go store their art materials. And it'll be really focused towards pottery, small sculpture, drawing, painting, and that sort of thing. So that's a huge amenity, one, for our building, and then also adding to the neighborhood. The other thing I'd like to
should be on if you set that on there.
They'll change it for you. Oh, no, I got to change
Maybe the operator can zoom out if I think that's, oh, there we go.
We're getting close. So as far as stormwater, knowing the impact, we are putting in a green roof, a paver system directly above the garage. That meets both the innovation the innovation portion of the design that the neighborhood is looking for. So it will take, from what we're told, the first half-inch of rain that come on the site will either be held or retained or slowed down prior to going into the storm sewer. And then on the art side, we are, as you can see, there's a whole list of items that we'll both be commissioning and working with local artists within the neighborhood. We started that to be the trellises in the public realm that go into the individual housing units. Those will be done by local artists. We'll commission both, the hand-painted tiles that go in the community room, the artwork, sculpture, and furniture will all be done locally to kind of bring that sense of art in the Northeast into this building. The last thing I want to talk about is the parking. Since our last proposal at the neighborhood group early this month, we both added additional parking spaces, reduced the housing units, and eliminated the need for a parking variance. So I think that is something that, one, we gave up the amount of units that would be on the site for having additional parking, knowing that that was a concern of the neighborhood. And then the space that was left over is actually making that art space, that maker space larger.
All right. And Commissioner Coleman, then Commissioner Lupke-Peer, do you have a question for the applicant?
In regards to the stormwater, I assume staff reviewed compliance with stormwater infiltration prior to the green roof, and that the green roof is additional on top of required stormwater management, or is it merely replacing?
Yep, absolutely. And that's one of the things, as being the owner of these buildings and intended owners, it is, one, it's something we provide in most of our buildings, is to have this green roof. One, it's amenity for the tenants that live above the roof, just to be able to look down onto a green space rather than rock. But it does also obviously meet the stormwater concern of the neighborhood. The final piece of that, we could have it on the 4th level, but we've chosen to go also meet one of the energy requirements to have solar panels on the 4th floor of the roof. So that's as opposed, we can't do both. So that one will be solar panels.
Commissioner Lupke-Peer.
Yes, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the art studio space. I'm wondering what the square footage is, because it seems like on the plan, it looks like not very big for the programming you described.
Yep. Yeah, and just, I'm not sure if we should talk about just small rooms. So the space with the gallery space, which will be incorporated with the entryway of our building, and the art studio space will probably be flopped in this rendering. So there will be more space kind of designated on that active corner to have, people, making things, pottery, coming to a space that they can, one, both store their materials, or there'll be open spaces that people can, they'd have to bring the supplies back up to the room, but it will be free for them to make their art.
And then on that note, so some of that pottery and stuff requires a kiln. Will there be a kiln in the building, in the garage or somewhere, or where?
Yep, we're looking at that for both the requirements on the exhausting the building code requirements and whatnot, but that is our intent.
Awesome. And then the last thing I would just suggest is it'd be interesting to see kind of how that gets reconfigured. Just some, I think it would be in your best interest to have some lockable storage areas, because I don't know if artists don't want to always have to bring fragile stuff back and forth, so if they could put it in a locked space without having to worry about it disappearing or getting messed with.
Right. Yeah, we're considering two pieces. One will be a space and that anyone can come to at any time, but they would have to bring their materials back to their apartment. The other is to have small workstations that they could, a small fee, but rent the space that would have locked storage, that it would be their space, their studio space within the apartment. So we have both.
I would consider it, I would encourage you to look at a third option, which is where they can have an open space to work, but maybe a place to store their tools and things they're making. Just so I'm trying to think of how people actually would use the space to actually make it an active corner. And a lot of artists I know, it would be where they would want to keep it there, especially messier things and fragile things, but they don't have to rent a work, like they wouldn't mind sharing a workspace, but they need to store their
locker
tools.
System or something.
Yeah, or something big enough, different size lockers maybe. So anyway, just food for thought.
Yep. And we actually have appointments in the next few weeks we're touring the other spaces that have maker space, and also hearing from the people that design them and also use them. So in addition to that, I think we'll get a lot of good feedback to what we can provide in that space.
All right. Are there any further questions of the applicant? If there are none, we can open things up to other speakers. I know there are at least a few of you who'd like to speak on this item. So if you'd like to make your way toward the center aisle and decide who goes first, and state your name and address for the record. I will ask you to keep your remarks to no more than just a couple minutes. I won't set the timer, but to go on a little bit long, I might ask you to wrap up.
My name's Jack Reavers. I live at 2326 Jackson, so that's right across the street. I've moved in there in 2015, so over 3 years ago, and I loved the area. When I was looking for a house, one of the big things was I wanted to be in Northeast, but I didn't want to be on a busy road.
So when I found this house, there's a lot of things I really like about the neighborhood. It's family oriented. It is actually pretty busy for being a side street off of Central, which is a busy street. But within a block from me, there's a park, a church. I'm next door to a daycare, which is great. And there's a few blocks more. There's a high school, and about a block and a half, one of the busiest parks I've ever seen. Really awesome park on Jackson. So there's a lot of children around. And right now, like I said, I was looking for a not so busy of an area. It's already pretty busy. So my big concerns are, we're already dealing with, I understand density, but I have an apartment that I look at from my house that's right behind where this one is being built. Probably it's on a bigger lot, and we get tons of traffic from that, like driving and parking. It's a lot of times I can't find a parking spot in front of my house, like if friends are coming over and stuff like that. So I'm a little concerned about adding an apartment that is going to have, I was trying to look at the Central Ave lofts. I think they had, it was some places said 66 units. I looked another where it was like 90, but this one's going to be 67 and smaller units and even less parking. So I guess I have big concerns about not being able to park, having kind of density between a church, daycare, park, residential area, when we're already feeling traffic from businesses, the other apartments, and just, everything going on, all the good things going on near the neighborhood. So really, those are my main concerns. And one more thing I'd like to point out, I kind of looked at where are the other apartments in the area, because to me it makes sense to put them on a busy street. So there's about 7 apartment buildings between 18th and Lowry. Some are bigger than others, but those are all either on Central or on Lowry, which are busy streets. Besides the Jackson Street Flats, which is subsidized artist housing with pretty big rooms, like 800 square feet for the singles, and I believe they have parking too. But that's just one other thing I'd like to point out. I guess I want to make sure that density is getting put in the right area, and that we already do have a lot of it. So
all right,
that's about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next speaker, please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Luciana Carvacho, and I live on 2322 Jackson Street Northeast. So right across the street from there, next door to my neighbor Jack. And I've owned a family childcare, home childcare, by Spanish bilingual for the last 10 years. Already, as he mentioned, it's become quite busy there because of all the new building that they built across the street and US Bank. So when they brought up the fact that they were going to put in yet another building, I was like, oh no, because it's already so difficult to take the kids on walks. And I love taking them to Jackson Square Park. I also love taking them to the library. And I love the fact that, you can walk down Jackson Street and avoid Central to get to those places. But if now we had a 67 unit building across from us, that would change that. And then I'm also worried about the parking already. Like there's a lot of traffic going into the alleys for the other small businesses that are around. Another point that I have is that it is nice to support small businesses down Central Avenue. Already they have a hard time finding enough parking, and they have to park around our block. That's why it's already so busy. So then adding something that's going to shorten parking even more is also going to probably affect some of the other businesses on Central Avenue. So again, I understand we need more density and to provide more housing, but Jackson Street's not Central. And if this project goes on, we're just going to have it's going to be like apartment buildings in front of our house. And we might also lose our privacy in our yard if it goes up as high as they're saying it will. So I'd like for those things to be considered just to keep the neighborhood what it is. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next speaker, please come to the microphone, state your name and address. Yes.
My name is Jean Gleasing, and I'm a little bit new at this. I don't know as much as other people. I live not on Jackson, but on 24th. We have a driveway that exits onto Jackson. I know that when I bought into that neighborhood, they were looking at actually townhomes to be built on that site. In the neighborhood studies, it was recommended to have far lower density than this 4-story building. Now, I know that they are trying to work and work with the neighbors, but I wish they had done so before they went ahead with developing a lot of plans, because it was kind of a surprise to all of a sudden have this there. I'm also concerned with parking. On 24th, right in front of, or right north of the development unit, there's parking only on one side of the street because the streets are so narrow. Like I say, my parking and all these people have parking driveways that go onto Jackson. The parking there, if you have 2 sides of parking, you can't have traffic going both ways. People pull over a little bit to let people through. And if I come out of my driveway twice, I've almost been run into by someone because you can't see. They park very close to the driveways. Vehicles have gotten so big, they've gotten wider, and the traffic is impossible. All the streets there are like this. I go to the library, and if I'm going someplace else, I don't walk. The library is just on Central and 22nd, just a block and a half away. 22nd, by the library. If you are going, and they have parking both sides of the streets there, if you go out and you want to go down the street and someone is coming this way, you don't go out there. You cannot both get through with the parking on the street. I am wanting to personally try to get rid of parking on one side of the street on 24th because it is so dangerous. That would make the driving a little bit better on that block, but it's all over the neighborhood. And putting in a unit like this, I know they have slightly increased the parking there. Parking's an issue too. They've slightly increased it, but people are going to own cars, and if they don't, they're going to have visitors. They're going to have people coming to visit who will be looking for parking and who will be looking for street parking. There is just a better place to put a construction like this, maybe even not have it 4 stories, although then that makes it less monetarily feasible. There are already artist housing down, I think it's not on Jackson, maybe 1 block over and down closer to 19th, where they have, I think there that they have controlled rent there, and this is entry level. There's going to be a lot of artists that won't be able to afford going in there. They could just as well go live farther down by down where the big arts district is down by California, where there is a lot of housing, not high, cheaper housing, and not the same traffic and not the same kids, not the same foot traffic, not the same parades on Central, not the same traffic issues on Central, and it is just a misplaced construction, beautiful as it is.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? And please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Yannicka Schaap. I live and work in the neighborhood. I work at 901 23rd Avenue Northeast, which is on the corner of 23rd and Jackson, on the same block that the building's proposed. And I own a home at the corner of 24th and Monroe, which is 2 blocks to the west. Generally speaking, I'm personally a pro-density individual. I don't have a car. I bike everywhere, and I usually like to see density added to neighborhoods. But when these folks presented to us at the neighborhood meeting, and we kind of rigged them over the coals, sorry guys, but the neighborhood doesn't seem to have a lot of support for this, and I think there are some good reasons why. Just speaking personally, I, again, generally pro-density, wouldn't traditionally care about not having enough parking on the site. Just coming from my own personal perspective, I'm just really wondering if this is the right site and the right project for a demonstration project like this, or like that kind of suggests. And professionally, I come at this from a climate action perspective. The building, I asked a lot of questions at the neighborhood meeting. The building does not have any documented, measurable goals for improvement or reduction on energy use. I work in passive house architecture. We do both consulting and architecture for these types of buildings. They did assure us just that they were engaging in conversations about energy use modeling, and it just didn't seem to have a lot of teeth. I would advocate, both as a resident and as a professional, that if we're going to approve not just one but multiple variances for a project, especially one that the neighborhood really doesn't support, the neighborhood residents, the project and the team behind the project is going to have to give a lot more than what this project gives the neighborhood. That's just my personal opinion. But the fact that they don't have, particularly don't have any energy use reduction goals that are measurable, such as striving to achieve a passive house standard for the building or some other rigorous target, it means that the building doesn't meet Minneapolis's own climate action goals, and so I would suggest that the city then shouldn't support it. And then in addition to all of the other concerns that my neighbors have had, it just seems like at a minimum they need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what else they can give us.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, and please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Paula Ramanowski. I live at 2318 Jackson Street, and I've lived there for 30 years. Originally, when the U.S. Bank building did go up there, Sherman and Associates, the Holland neighborhood, I guess, supported it with the agreement that the townhomes would go there. And I just feel like we keep getting the rug pulled out from under us by either a developer or someone says they're going to do this, and then it turns around. I understand the housing bubble that went on. But the traffic, and there are two duplexes across the street, owner occupied, but there is no driveway or alley there. I mean, through no fault of theirs. I mean, there's an alley in the back, but they have no parking. And they all do own cars. And it is really getting to be amazingly, it's scary to back out of my driveway. I have had to call and had cars towed out of my driveway because they park across it 3 times. I mean, it's insane. I would love to have more, density, like she said. But is there a law that, or a rule that states in the city it has to be the minimum is a 4-level apartment building? Is that a statute, a law? Because that's what I was told, the minimum they could build. It had to be at least 4 stories and nothing less. Is that a law? Is that a rule?
I guess I can answer that. There's no minimum amount of minimum building height or minimum amount of density.
Okay, that's what I needed. I was told that that it had to be 4 stories, and according to the city, maybe something smaller. But like she had mentioned, all the variances, it's just such a tight piece of land. It truly is. And I don't know if any of you went out and drove around it or seen it for yourselves or drove up and down the streets, because a lot of the U.S. Bank tenants, it's extra to pay for parking underground in that building. So a lot of people choose not to or can't afford it. So the only place they have left to park is Jackson, 24th, and Central. And now with the new corners that butt out, or I don't know what you call them, with the new handicap, how big they have become on the corners now, it is seriously dangerous to make a turn on 24th because you only have so far to swing, and they allow parking right there, and you're barely able to put 2 cars there. And that's my experience in the 30 years I've been there. And I'm afraid, like I said, to get the rug pulled out from us one more time, that something's going to go up and everybody walks away and we're left with another crazy mess. And I hope you would consider that. And I appreciate your thoughts on this.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? Anyone else? If there's no one else, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, are there any further questions of staff? Otherwise, we have a total of 8 applications before us. Commissioner Magrino.
I will make a motion to adopt staff findings and approve the application to rezone the property, item A.
We have a motion to approve item A, the rezoning. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll just add, going from R4 to R5 at this location, I think is reasonable. There is R5 zoning directly adjacent to it. Both zoning districts really allow similar things. I know, and we heard from a number of speakers, the initial desire to have townhomes at this location, and I realized that the neighborhoods plan and some other planning documents maybe suggested that. The developer of the U.S. Bank site had proposed that in the longer term. Obviously, that housing market has evolved a little bit, and I think we don't see a lot in the way of townhome density projects anymore. And both R4 and R5 allow for both townhomes and a multi-story apartment building. So I think with the findings that staff outlined, we can support this. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve item A, the rezoning. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman. Aye. Colgill.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Lipke-Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
Motion carries. Moving along, Commissioner Magrino.
I will make a motion to adopt staff findings and approve the variances in items B, C, and D and E.
All right, we have a motion to approve items B, C, D, and E. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Commissioner Lukey-Pier.
I have a question for staff. Peter, just real quick, just because a lot of the comments we heard today were related to parking. Can you just, it would appear to me there's no variance for the parking requirement. So I assume that this means the project is meeting the minimum parking required by the city for this?
That's correct. Yes. The project is located within close proximity to a high frequency bus transit line, which means that it can qualify for a 50% reduction in its parking requirement. So it's a half space per unit basically is the requirement, and they're meeting that.
Okay. So I just wanted to say that I'll be supporting the variances, if only because if they weren't supported, we would not actually be able to accommodate the amount of parking that the site is providing for the tenants. And since that is a major concern, shrinking the building footprint would actually put more cars on the street where there appears to not be enough room for them already. So unfortunately, we cannot mandate that they require more parking because they are meeting the required minimum. And so that's why we'll be supporting the variance request for side yard or for setbacks.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve items B, C, D, and E. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman. Aye. Colgill.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Lipke-Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
That motion carries. Commissioner Magrino.
And I'll make a motion to approve variance F, the variance to increase maximum lot coverage, item F.
Right. A motion to approve item F, the variance for lot coverage. Is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve item F. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman. Aye. Colgill.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Lipke-Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
And that motion carries. Commissioner Magrino.
And I'll make a motion to return the variance to increase the maximum impervious surface coverage to the applicant. That's item G.
Second.
And we have a motion and a second to approve item G. Is there any discussion? Or I should say return item G. Hearing none, clerk, please call it roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Colgill.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Lipke-Pier.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
That motion carries. And item H, Commissioner Magrino.
I will make a motion to approve item H, site plan review. with the 4 stated conditions, and I would like to add a 5th condition that the applicant provide 2 more short-term bike parking spaces than what's currently provided, for a total of 4.
Okay. So we have a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second to approve item H, the site plan review with the 4 stated conditions, adding a 5th, that there are 2 additional short-term bike parking spaces provided. Commissioner Rockwell.
I just wanted to touch on project broadly. I think this is near a high frequency transit line, and that is important to have development there, and it's near a lot of walkable amenities. I agree with the comments on greater climate matters steps, but we don't have a structure right now in which we have sufficient authority to mandate that. And we're talking about that in the redrafting of the comprehensive plan, but we don't have that authority right now. And so it's not something we can ask for, but I agree. So I wanted to make that point.
All right. And is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve item H with the 4 stated conditions, adding a 5th related to bike parking. And clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Coverdale.
Aye.
Franzer.
Aye.
Lipke-Peer.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 8. Also concludes our business for today. We have committee of the whole this Thursday. Our next meeting is August 13th, and we are adjourned.